"Blake, we need to discuss some irregularities I found in the vendor payments." I stood in my CEO's doorway holding a folder that could change everything. He didn't even look up from his phone. "Send it to accounting," he said, waving me away like I was interrupting something important. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 48 years old, and I'd been the compliance officer at Titan Industries for 12 years. I knew every financial regulation, every audit protocol, every red flag that management hoped nobody would notice. This wasn't some minor accounting error. This was systematic fraud, and I just handed my boss the evidence on a silver platter. He chose to ignore it. I nodded once, turned around, and walked back to my office. No argument, no second attempt to explain. Just quiet acknowledgement that he'd made his choice. What he didn't know was that I'd already made copies of everything. And I was very, very good at my job. Titan Industries manufactured industrial components in Cleveland, Ohio. We weren't flashy, but we were profitable. I started here in 2011, right after the recession, when companies were desperate for people who understood compliance and risk management. The CEO back then was Howard Price, a straight shooter who built the company from nothing. He retired 5 years ago, and the board brought in Blake Carmichael from a competing firm. Blake was everything Howard wasn't. Expensive suits, corporate buzzwords, and an obsession with quarterly earnings that made him take shortcuts. Under Howard, compliance mattered. Under Blake, compliance was an obstacle to profit margins. I watched the culture shift slowly. Vendors who'd worked with us for decades got replaced by new companies offering suspiciously low bids. Purchase orders started bypassing normal approval chains. My compliance reports, which Howard used to read personally, started getting filed away unread. 6 months ago, I noticed the first irregularity. A payment to a vendor called Summit Supply Solutions for $340,000. The invoice looked legitimate. Purchase order number, itemized list of parts, all the right signatures. But when I cross-referenced it with our inventory system, those parts never arrived at our warehouse. I called our receiving manager, Tom Bradley. "Tom, did we get a shipment from Summit Supply in March?" He checked his logs. "Never heard of them, Marcus. Nothing in our system." I thanked him and started digging deeper. Summit Supply had no website, no business history before last year, and a registered address that led to a UPS store in Cincinnati. The authorized signature on our payment approval was Blake Carmichael himself. I made a note in my private records and kept watching. One suspicious payment could be a mistake. A pattern was something else entirely. Over the next 3 months, I found 11 more payments to Summit Supply. The amounts varied. $280,000, $195,000, $420,000, but the pattern stayed consistent. Each invoice looked legitimate. Each payment was approved by Blake. None of the materials ever reached our warehouse. I ran the numbers on my lunch break, sitting in my car where nobody could see my screen. Total diverted, $3.2 million. I pulled up Summit Supply's business registration through the Ohio Secretary of State website. The registered agent was listed as Catherine Carmichael. A quick social media search confirmed what I suspected, Blake's sister. They weren't even trying to hide it well. They just assumed nobody would look. I sat in my car staring at the evidence, feeling something shift inside me. For 12 years, I'd protected this company. I'd caught fraud attempts from vendors, stopped employees from falsifying expense reports, ensured we stayed compliant during audits. I spent the weekend building my case. Bank records showing the payment trail. Business registrations linking Summit Supply to Blake's sister. Inventory reports proving the materials never arrived. Email chains showing Blake personally approving each payment, bypassing the normal vendor verification process. I organized everything chronologically in a binder with color-coded tabs. On Monday morning, I requested a meeting with Blake. His assistant scheduled me for 15 minutes on Thursday afternoon. When Thursday came, I walked into his corner office with my binder. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked downtown Cleveland. His desk was bigger than my entire cubicle. "Marcus," he said without standing. "What's so urgent?" I opened the binder and laid out the first page. "I've found evidence of vendor fraud. Summit Supply Solutions has received $3.2 million over 6 months, but none of their shipments appear in our inventory system." Blake glanced at the page, then back at me. "Summit Supply is a legitimate vendor," Blake said, his voice flat. "They provide specialized components that go directly to our Buffalo facility." That was a lie. I'd already checked with Buffalo. "I contacted Buffalo last week," I said carefully. "They have no record of receiving anything from Summit Supply." Something flickered across his face. Annoyance, maybe anger. Then someone in Buffalo isn't doing their job properly. "I'll look into it." He closed my binder and slid it back across his desk. "Anything else?" I could have pushed harder. I could have mentioned his sister's name on the business registration, the UPS store address, the pattern of approvals. But something in his eyes told me that would be a mistake. "No," I said. "That's everything." I picked up my binder and walked out. His assistant was already on the phone as I passed her desk, probably calling someone to clean up the mess I'd uncovered. The next morning, I found a meeting invitation in my inbox. Organizational restructuring discussion with Blake and Patricia Holmes from Human Resources. No agenda, no explanation. I knew what this was. I'd seen it happen to other employees who became inconvenient. They were going to eliminate my position, offer me a severance package with a non-disclosure agreement, and make sure I couldn't talk about what I'd found. I had until 2 o'clock that afternoon to decide my next move. I could take the severance, sign the papers, and walk away. Or I could fight. I spent my lunch hour in my car, looking through the copies I'd made of every document. I'd learned a long time ago to keep backup records of everything. Company policy said all compliance documentation should stay on company servers. But I'd witnessed too many files mysteriously disappear during system upgrades. My personal backup drive contained 7 years of records. The meeting was exactly what I expected. Patricia sat with a folder in her lap, not making eye contact. Blake leaned back in his chair like he was bored. "Marcus, after careful consideration, we're restructuring the compliance department," Patricia began, reading from prepared notes. "Your position is being eliminated effective immediately. We're offering a generous severance package, 6 months' salary, continued health insurance, and a positive reference." She slid papers across the table. "There's a confidentiality agreement attached. Standard language about not discussing proprietary company information." I picked up the papers and pretended to read them. The severance was actually decent, probably because they were scared of what I knew. "I understand," I said quietly. Patricia looked relieved. Blake looked satisfied. Neither of them noticed that I hadn't agreed to anything yet. "I'll need a few days to review this with my lawyer," I added. Blake's expression hardened. "We need a decision today." "That's not how this works," I said, keeping my voice level. "You're terminating my employment. I have the right to review any legal documents before signing them." Patricia shifted uncomfortably. She knew I was right. Blake stood up, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "Don't make this difficult, Marcus. You're a smart guy. Take the deal." I stood too, matching his stance. "I'll give you my answer Friday." I walked out before either of them could respond. Back at my desk, I had 2 hours before security would escort me out. I worked quickly, forwarding key emails to my personal account, copying the most recent compliance reports, documenting everything Blake had said in our meeting. My phone buzzed with a text from Tom in receiving. "Heard you're leaving. That sucks." You were the only honest one here. I didn't respond. Honest people didn't last long at the new Titan Industries. At 4:30, security arrived at my desk. I drove home in silence, my box of personal items on the passenger seat. 12 years of my career reduced to a coffee mug, a desk plant, and a photo of my daughter's college graduation. My wife Rachel was already home, working from her laptop at the kitchen table. She took one look at my face and knew. They let you go? I nodded, setting the box down. Restructuring. They're offering severance if I sign a confidentiality agreement. Rachel closed her laptop. After 23 years of marriage, she could read me perfectly. But you found something, didn't you? Something they want to bury. I told her everything. The fraudulent vendor, Blake's sister, the $3.2 million in diverted funds. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. What are you going to do? She finally asked. That was the question. I could sign their papers, take the money, and move on. Find another job, forget what I'd seen. I spent Friday morning organizing my evidence. Bank statements, business registrations, email chains, inventory reports, everything that proved Blake Carmichael was stealing from his own company. The fraud was elegant in its simplicity. Create a fake vendor, approve inflated invoices, pocket the difference. Since Summit Supply was supposedly providing real materials, auditors looking for completely fake transactions would miss it. Over 6 months, Blake had diverted $3.2 million. I pulled up Titan's latest quarterly report, which Blake had presented to the board last month. He'd bragged about cost savings and operational efficiency. Meanwhile, he was systematically looting the company his predecessor had built. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. Marcus Webb, a woman's voice asked. This is Angela Foster from the board of directors. I heard about your termination. I was hoping we could talk. I was surprised. Board members didn't usually call terminated employees. What about? I asked. Off the record? About why Blake was so eager to get rid of you. We met at a coffee shop 20 miles outside Cleveland. Angela was in her 60s, sharply dressed, with the kind of presence that came from decades of business experience. She'd been on Titan's board for 15 years. Howard Price recommended you personally when he hired you, she said, stirring her coffee. He told me you were the most thorough compliance officer he'd ever met. I nodded. Howard took compliance seriously. Blake doesn't, Angela said flatly. I've been watching him for 2 years now. Something feels wrong, but I can't prove anything. Then I heard he terminated you with less than a day's notice, and I knew. I pulled out a folder from my bag. Summit Supply Solutions. $3.2 million over 6 months. Registered to Catherine Carmichael, Blake's sister. None of the materials ever reached our facilities. Angela's expression didn't change, but I saw her grip tighten on her coffee cup. You brought this to Blake? Thursday afternoon. He dismissed it. Friday morning, I was fired. Do you have documentation? I slid the folder across the table. Angela opened it carefully, scanning the first few pages. Her jaw tightened as she worked through the evidence. This is damning, she finally said. Why are you showing me this instead of taking your severance and leaving? That was a fair question. Because Howard gave me a chance when other companies wouldn't. He trusted me to protect Titan. I'm not going to let Blake destroy what Howard built just because it's easier to walk away. Angela closed the folder. The board meeting is next Tuesday. Blake is expecting approval for his annual bonus, $4 million based on the cost savings he's supposedly achieved. She looked at me directly. If I present this to the board, there will be an investigation. Blake will know you're the source. He'll come after you legally, maybe criminally. He'll claim you fabricated evidence, stole company data, anything to discredit you. I'd already considered that possibility. I kept backup copies of everything within legal bounds. I documented every step. Angela stood up, taking the folder with her. I'll need additional verification before I can bring this to the board. Can you get me access to the raw financial data? I shook my head. My system access was revoked when they terminated me. But Tom Bradley in receiving can verify that none of Summit Supply's shipments arrived. And your auditing team should be able to trace the payments through our banking records. She nodded slowly. I'll start there. In the meantime, don't sign Blake's confidentiality agreement. Don't do anything that limits your ability to cooperate with an investigation. We parted ways in the parking lot. As I drove home, I felt something close to relief. For the first time since this started, I wasn't fighting alone. That weekend, I received 3 phone calls. The first was from Blake himself. Marcus, I understand you met with Angela Foster. That was inappropriate and potentially illegal. You're no longer employed here. Company business is none of your concern. I kept my voice calm. I had coffee with a friend, Blake. Nothing inappropriate about that. If you've shared confidential company information, I'm aware of my legal obligations, I interrupted. Are you? The line went dead. The second call came from Patricia in HR. Marcus, we need your signature on the separation documents by Monday, or the severance offer expires. This is your final notice. I told her I'd think about it and hung up. The third call was from a number I didn't recognize. When I answered, a man's voice asked, "Is this Marcus Webb?" "Who's asking?" "My name is Tyler Brooks. I'm an investigative reporter with the Cleveland Observer. I'm working on a story about financial irregularities at local companies. Your name came up in some research. Would you be willing to talk?" My pulse quickened. "How did you get my name?" "Can't reveal sources, but I'm hearing things about Titan Industries. Vendor fraud, executive misconduct. Thought you might have insight." I met Tyler Brooks at the same coffee shop where I'd met Angela. He was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with a notebook instead of a laptop. "Old school," he said, noticing me looking at it. "Can't hack a paper notebook." I appreciated the irony. We sat in the back corner, away from other customers. "What do you know about Titan Industries?" I asked carefully. Tyler flipped through his notebook. "I've been tracking a pattern. Mid-sized manufacturing companies, new CEOs brought in from outside, sudden changes in vendor relationships, shell companies registered to family members. Titan fits the pattern." He looked up at me. "And you were their compliance officer until last week." "I can't discuss confidential company information," I said, which was technically true. "But hypothetically, if someone discovered fraud at their company and reported it internally, what happens if the CEO is the one committing the fraud?" Tyler smiled. "Hypothetically, that person should document everything, report it to the board of directors, and possibly contact law enforcement." "What if the board doesn't believe them?" I asked. "Then you go public," Tyler said simply. "Fraud at this scale isn't just a company problem. It's a shareholder problem, an investor problem, potentially a criminal problem. The public has a right to know." I sat back, considering the implications. Going to the press was nuclear option. There would be no coming back from that. "I'm not ready to go on record," I said finally. "But if I were, hypothetically, how would that work?" Tyler explained the process. He'd need documentation, multiple sources to verify the story, and time to confirm everything before publication. "But if the evidence is solid," he added, "this is the kind of story that ends careers and starts investigations." We exchanged contact information. As I left, Tyler called after me. "Marcus? Whatever you decide, do it quickly. People like Blake don't wait around for exposure. They cover tracks. I knew he was right. Monday morning, I got a call from Angela Foster. The board has called an emergency session for Thursday afternoon, Angela said. I've shared preliminary information with the audit committee. They're taking it seriously. Relief washed over me. What happens now? Independent forensic audit of all vendor payments from the last 2 years. Blake has been told it's a routine compliance check, but he knows something's wrong. He's been asking questions about who requested the audit. Angela paused. Marcus, he's also been talking to the legal team about pursuing action against you for theft of proprietary data. He's building a case to discredit you before the full investigation reveals what he's done. I'd expected this, but it still made my stomach turn. I followed all protocols for compliance documentation. Everything I have is legally defensible. I know. But legal battles are expensive and exhausting. You need to be prepared for him to fight dirty. That afternoon, I received a certified letter from Titan's legal team. It accused me of violating confidentiality agreements, removing company property, and interfering with business operations. The letter demanded I return all company documents and cease contact with current employees and board members. It threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 48 hours. I called Tyler Brooks. Blake's coming after me. I need this story published before he buries the evidence. I need 3 days minimum, Tyler said. I have to verify everything, get statements from multiple sources, run it past our legal team. We can't publish without proper verification. I don't have 3 days. Then go to law enforcement. File a fraud report. That creates a legal record that can't be covered up. I called the FBI's Cleveland field office and asked about reporting corporate fraud. They connected me with Agent Paula Vincent from the White Collar Crime Division. I need to report systematic fraud at my former employer, I told her. She scheduled an appointment for the next morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Blake in his corner office, confident he'd gotten away with it. About Howard Price, who'd built this company on integrity and trust. Agent Vincent's office was smaller than I expected. She was in her 40s, professional but not intimidating. I walked her through everything. The fake vendor, the diverted payments, Blake's sister's involvement, my termination after reporting it internally. She took notes without interrupting. When I finished, she looked up. Do you have documentation? I handed her copies of everything. Bank records, business registrations, email chains, inventory reports. She reviewed them methodically. This is solid, she said finally. But I need you to understand something. Federal investigations take time. We're talking months, possibly years before any charges are filed. In the meantime, Blake will continue operating. The board is conducting their own audit, I offered. They meet Thursday. Agent Vincent nodded. That might actually be better. Internal consequences happen faster than legal ones. Companies can fire executives immediately. Federal prosecution takes much longer. She promised to open a case file and start a formal investigation. It wasn't the immediate justice I wanted, but it was something. Thursday morning arrived cold and gray. I knew the board meeting started at 2 o'clock. I wasn't invited, obviously, but Angela had promised to call me afterward. At 1 o'clock, my phone rang. Tyler Brooks. The story's ready. I have independent confirmation of the fraud from 3 sources, including someone inside Titan's accounting department. We publish tonight at 6 o'clock. I wanted you to know first. My heart pounded. Tonight? Blake's going to see it coming. The board meeting is in an hour. They might act first, or they might circle wagons. Either way, by tomorrow morning, everyone in Cleveland will know what he did. I thanked him and hung up, feeling the weight of what I'd set in motion. At 4:30, Angela called. The board has requested Blake's immediate resignation. If he refuses, he'll be terminated for cause, which means no severance, no bonus, and potential legal liability. The vote was unanimous. I could barely speak. It's over? His part is over, Angela said. We still have to unwind the fraud, recover what we can, and rebuild the compliance systems he destroyed. Which brings me to why I'm really calling. The board wants to offer you your job back. Not as compliance officer. As Vice President of Ethics and Compliance, reporting directly to the board. Doubled salary, full authority to implement whatever systems you think we need. I sat down heavily. After everything Blake had done to push me out, the board was offering me his level of authority. I need time to think about it, I said. Of course. But Marcus? We need people like you. People who do the right thing even when it's hard. That evening at 6 o'clock, the Cleveland Observer published Tyler's story. Titan Industries CEO linked to $3.2 million fraud scheme. By 7 o'clock, it was trending on local social media. By 8 o'clock, 2 other news outlets had picked it up. My phone started ringing, reporters, former colleagues, even a few headhunters who'd heard about the story and wanted to talk about opportunities. Blake's public statement came the next morning through his lawyer. He denied everything, claimed the board had forced him out due to philosophical differences, and threatened to sue for defamation. But the evidence was already public. Tyler's story included enough documentation to make Blake's denial look desperate. By noon, the FBI confirmed they were investigating. By Friday afternoon, Blake's sister Catherine had deleted all her social media accounts and Summit Supply's business registration showed administratively dissolved. They were running scared. Rachel found me on our back porch that evening, watching the sunset. How do you feel? She asked. That was a complicated question. Relieved that the truth was out. Angry that it took this long. Sad that Howard's company had been corrupted. I feel like I did my job, I said finally. She sat beside me. You did more than your job. You put your career and reputation on the line to do what was right. The next week, I met with Angela and the board. I accepted their offer. Vice President of Ethics and Compliance, reporting directly to the board, with full authority to rebuild the systems Blake had destroyed. My first day back, I walked through Titan's offices with new eyes. People looked at me differently now. Not as the compliance officer they could ignore, but as someone who'd proven that integrity mattered. Tom Bradley stopped by my new office, actually an office now, not a cubicle. Glad you're back, Marcus. This place needs someone who gives a damn. Over the next month, I implemented new protocols. Every vendor now required 3 levels of verification. All payments above $50,000 needed board committee approval. I hired 2 new compliance officers and gave them direct reporting authority. I also worked with Agent Vincent on the FBI investigation. Blake and his sister were eventually charged with wire fraud and conspiracy. The trial was still months away, but the evidence was overwhelming. Blake's $4 million bonus? Never paid. Instead, the board used that money to establish a whistleblower protection fund for employees who reported misconduct. 6 months after everything started, I sat in my office reviewing the latest compliance report. Every system was clean. Every vendor was verified. Every approval chain was documented. My phone buzzed with a text from Tyler Brooks. Jury verdict just came in. Blake guilty on all counts. Thought you'd want to know. I stared at the message for a long moment, then walked to my window. Downtown Cleveland stretched out below me, the same city where Blake had thought he was untouchable. I'd learned something important through all of this. The quiet person who documents everything, who follows procedures, who refuses to look away from uncomfortable truths, that person has more power than any executive who thinks rules don't apply to them. Blake took a company built on integrity and tried to turn it into his personal bank account. He ignored my warning because he thought I was nobody, just some compliance officer who could be easily dismissed. He was wrong. Sometimes the people you underestimate are the ones who cost you everything. I smiled and got back to work.